The man who wrote our Constitution wrote you a warning letter, and almost nobody alive today has read it.
Do you believe nicotine is not addictive?
I believe nicotine is not addictive, yes.
Cigarettes and nicotine clearly do not meet the classic definitions of addiction.
A mercantile interest, a moneyed interest with many lesser interests grow up of necessity in civilized nations. If you're wondering what is this, right? So what is the purpose of Federalist number 10, written by James Madison, defended the form of Republican government proposed by the Constitution. Critics of the Constitution argue that the proposed federal government was too large and would be unresponsive for the people. So in response, Madison explored majority rule versus minority rights in this essay, and he countered that it was exactly the great number of factions and diversity that would avoid tyranny. And the reason why we're doing the show today is because yesterday I stumbled across the fact that we very well might just be in the middle of watching our government become tyrannical. Okay, so what he's saying here, a landed interest, a manufacturing interest. So these are interests in other things besides just our nation, okay? Just the good of our people. A landed interest, a manufacturing interest, a mercantile interest, a merchant, a moneyed interest whatsoever, with many lesser interests, grow up of necessity in civilized nations and divided them into different classes. Actuated by different sentiments and views, the regulation, zoom in, the regulation of these various and interfering interests forms the principal task of modern legislation and involves the spirit of party and faction in the necessary and ordinary operations of the government. No man is allowed to be judged in his own cause, not allowed to be a judge in his own cause, because his interest would certainly bias his judgment, and not improbably it would corrupt his integrity. Okay, and it even says, with equal, nay, with greater reason, a body of men are unfit to be both judges and parties at the same time. Yet what are many of the most important actions of legislation but so many judicial determinations, not indeed concerning the rights of single persons, but concerning the rights of large bodies of citizens? Okay, a moneyed interest, he named it. He saw AIPAC already coming. He saw Big Pharma coming. He saw the Sacklers coming. He saw Citizens United coming. He saw all of this coming in 1787 with a quill pen, mind you, with a quill pen. So let me remove this thing. It's driving me nuts. The dude wrote this with an old-fashioned pen and ink in Virginia. And later in the same essay, he writes, let me find it, men of factious tempers. Let's go through it right here, and we'll just kind of read this from the beginning. Men of factious tempers, of local prejudices, or of sinister designs, may, by intrigue, by corruption, or by other means, first obtain the suffrages and then betray the interests of the people. The question resulting is whether small or extensive republics are more favorable to the election of proper guardians of the public weal, and it is clearly decided in favor of the latter by two obvious considerations. In the first place, it is to be remarked that however small the republic may be, the representatives must be raised to a certain number in order to guard against the cabals of a few, and that, however large it may be, they must be limited to a certain number in order to guard against the confusion of many, a multitude. Hence, the number of representatives in the two cases not being in proportion to that of the two constituents and being proportionally greater of the small republic, it follows that if the proportion of fit characters be not less in the large than in the... So this is all explaining how many people should be, because if there's too many or too less, all right, consequently a greater probability of a fit to be choice. So Hamilton, so what he's saying is he's giving a warning, all right? He's giving a warning. He just described every senator who has taken an AIPAC check, okay? It's hard to understand. But every congressman who voted for the Iraq War is in this mentioned here. Every member of the Heritage Foundation or Turning Point USA who bent to a donor first obtain the suffrages, then betray the interest of the people. That is not a warning. That is a confession from the future. Protection, okay? Madison wrote it before the Constitution was even ratified. Hamilton called political factions the most fatal disease of popular government. Washington, in his farewell address in 1796, warned against permanent parties and against foreign attachments, both at the same time. We violated both within less than 100 years. We have been paying for it ever since. Okay. The founders gave us a republic and they told us how to keep it. And they told us what would kill it. And we didn't listen. And they hid the information from us, or they don't teach us, whatever it is. Okay. So 4 dates. If you remember nothing else, let's remember these 4. Hold on one second. Let me know in the chat. Are you locked in? Put a lock in there. Type lock if you're locked in. Let's run it. Yeah. Since this isn't just about TPUSA, we're not going to get 1,000 live viewers. It's okay. The ones that are here are the ones that matter, because it actually is. That's how this works. It all adds up to the same bullshit we're dealing with today. Okay, from all these people: Heritage Foundation, TPUSA, all these PACs, AIPAC, MAGA PAC, bullshit PAC, suck me PAC, fuck you PAC. It's all the same shit. Okay, they're taking money from people to fuck us all over, and I'm tired of it. I'm done. Okay, the Tillman Act, 1907. Teddy Roosevelt, fresh off of a corporate kickback scandal that helped him win in 1904, signs the first campaign finance law in American history. Okay, this is the Tillman Act of 1907. And we could read it here. Was the first campaign finance law in the United States. The act prohibited monetary contributions to federal candidates by corporations and nationally chartered banks, interstate. So they're saying no money from across the land without the United States, only American money. And they're saying it's an act that literally prohibits any monetary contribution to a federal candidate, which is a politician, by any corporation or international banks, okay? Or nationally chartered banks, any banks. I'm sorry. So we're looking at, even inside this country, nationally, someone that is from another state, okay, trying to get something to benefit themselves, even in this country. They didn't want it because they knew. And really, the background started in New York as a state investigation. Ties between the major insurance companies and Wall Street banks accidentally discovered evidence that a New York life insurance company had made $48,000, which is equivalent to $1.75 million, as a contribution to Roosevelt's 1904 campaign. The discovery was followed by daily revelations about other corporate contributions. The president of all the big insurance firms and many of the smaller ones testified that they had made contributions to the Republic presidential campaign in 1896, 1900, 1904. And so they created an act because of it. The law was simple. It prohibited monetary contributions to federal candidates by corporations and nationally chartered interstate banks. The man it was named for Senator Benjamin Tillman, it was named after, stood on the Senate floor and said the quiet part out loud. Americans, he said, viewed their elected representatives as instrumentalities and agents of corporations. This was 150 years ago, almost 200 years ago. That was 1907. The sentence is older than antibiotics, by the way. And we are still living the same bullshit. In 1925, we have the Federal Corrupt Practices Act. Tillman with teeth, essentially. I wonder if it says it in here. Maybe not. Let me see if I can find that one. Corrupt Practices Act. Let's search that. Yeah, right here. Federal Corrupt Practices Act, following 1910, amended 1911 and 1925. It remained the nation's primary law regulating campaign finance in federal elections until the passage of Federal Election Campaign Act in 1971. What else happened in that year? What else happened around that time, 1971? So you have that, okay? It required every political committee operating in 2 or more states, to file the names of contributions and recipients, reaffirm the ban on corporate political contributions, and prohibited candidates from soliciting funds from federal employees. The system actually worked for just about 50 years. Then you had 1976, Buckley versus Valeo. This is the real crime, and most people blame Citizens United, but they're wrong. So let me pull this up here. Buckley versus Valeo. Okay. While the government can limit how much individuals contribute to a political campaign, it cannot place limits on campaign expenditures by a candidate from personal resources, or independent expenditures by groups supporting the campaign. This is because the court equated money with speech in this context. So the First Amendment applies. And this is the problem. The court equates money with speech. And I've been saying it on this channel. Okay. While the U.S. Supreme Court's disastrous 2010 decision in Citizens United versus v. FEC, is frequently blamed for causing these problems, the roots of our present democratic malaise predates that ruling by more than 3 decades. So the Supreme Court in 1976 decided Buckley versus Valeo 7-1. By a 7-1 tally, the court held that Congress could not, under the First Amendment, limit spending in political races. That is the moment money became speech in America. Okay, not a metaphor, but literally legal doctrine. If you have more money, you have more speech and your voice is louder. If you have less money, you have less speech, and the richest 1% now have all the speech. The other 99% are politely invited to be quiet. Shut the fuck up. You don't have enough money. You got nothing to say around here, bro. Get your chips up. And then you had 2010 Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, 5-4. Anthony Kennedy writes the opinion, which is right here. Citizens United. These are all supreme.justia.com. Okay. Limited independent expenditures. This is all about money and politics. Okay. So the Tillman Act, it repealed in spirit. The founders mocked the Republic, auctioned. In 2010, Supreme Court decision furthered, it tilted the political influence toward wealthy donors and corporations and reversed a century-old campaign finance restriction and enabled corporations and other outside groups to spend unlimited money on elections, resulting in a fusion of private wealth and political power unseen since the late 19th century, if even ever. If you want to know when the American Republic died, it was not in 2010. It was January 30th, 1976. Citizens United did not kill the patient. Citizens United just turned off the machine. So this is tobacco CEO, a statement to Congress. It was a 1994 news clip. Let me see. Oh, here, we have it right here. This will be perfect.
Let me
So let's play this right here.
begin my questioning on the matter of whether or not nicotine is addictive. Let me ask you first, and I'd like to just go down the row, whether each of you believes that nicotine is not addictive. I heard virtually all of you touch on it. And just yes or no. Do you believe nicotine is not addictive?
I believe nicotine is not addictive, yes.
Mr. Johnston.
Congressman, cigarettes and nicotine clearly do not meet the classic definitions of addiction. There is no intoxication.
We'll take that as a no. And again, time is short. If you could just, I think each of you believe nicotine is not addictive. We just would like to have this for the record.
I don't believe that nicotine or our products are addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
And I too believe that nicotine is not addictive.
Dr. Campbell, I assume that you're aware that your testimony, and you said in your testimony that nicotine is not addictive, is contradicted by an overwhelming number of authorities and associations. For example, in 1988, the Surgeon General of the United States wrote an entire report on this topic. The Surgeon General, of course, is the chief health advisor to our government. I assume you have reviewed that report?
Yes, I have, sir.
All right.
So the short answer is that cigarettes are addicting. Pharmacological and behavioral that's why I smoke vape. I'm so addicted. It's always with me. You see me in person, you're gonna see it's in my hand. All right. The behavioral and psychological process is it's addictive. And that study has already been done. It was a Surgeon's General report multiple years before these men in suits went into a congressional hearing, and all CEOs of the 7 largest tobacco companies in America just lied. You've got William Campbell of Philip Morris, James Johnson of R.J. Reynolds, Joseph Taddeo of U.S. Tobacco, Andrew Tisch of Lorillard, and Edward Horgan, Liget, and some others. Thomas Sandifer of Brown & Williamson, Donald Johnson of American Tobacco. They raised their right hand. They swore an oath, and one by one on national television, under oath, under penalty of perjury, they all said the exact same thing. 7 men, 7 oaths, 7 lies, and we have the receipts here that prove that they knew. All right. So they knew. Their lawyers knew. Their lobbyists knew. And every member of Congress who had taken a tobacco check for the previous 30 years also knew. So ADN, 500,000 Americans die per year from tobacco, 500,000 every year. And that number is tracking still today, right now. What does it tell you that nobody has ever gone to prison for that specifically?
Well, it tells me a few things because I don't necessarily know if it's one of those things where they've designed the product to be worse than it is, right? Because people have used tobacco for centuries. But now when you get a hold of it and make it into a big corporation thing, like we know with food, they do the same thing. They make it worse for people than it was intended to be. So I think that's kind of the story here as well. It's like they first of all probably put nicotine in these cigarettes to make it more addictive. And then that way you smoke it a lot more than you normally would have. And then we also know they add chemicals to cigarettes and cigars and all of those things. So it's not even just one thing. It's like several things have happened and they know they do that stuff because they want you to, just like they engineer food to be more addictive. It's the same thing. They did that to the cigarettes and then try to say it wasn't addictive. That's my take.
Yeah, I mean it's disheartening because we're even seeing it with the I have a clip here I'm going to play in a second. Let me see if I can find this particular thing, but it's about the Sackler family, which is where we're going to head to next. But we're seeing it with the Epstein files, right? If you got money, you're not going to get in trouble. We're going to protect you from the worst of crimes, okay? From the worst of crimes. And that's a major problem. I don't know how we're going to be able to actually get through and say, hey, like, when is enough going to be enough? But at the end of the day, what can we do except for talk about it like we are today? And I think that's really the most important thing, is just to talk about it. If we don't, then we're kind of in a position where it's like, all right, well, what else do? We just watch it happen? How long are we going to go? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think
So,
the other thing that you've touched on several times is when money is involved in politics, then all of this stuff happens because it wasn't intended to be this way. People, when you run a country or, even like a family, right? You have a tribe, the leader of that tribe should want to take care of its family. And instead, they want to do the exact opposite to us, which is just inherently kind of evil on top of all of that. So it's like this mix of the money issue with just like evil leaders at the top who are part of this Epstein class. So it makes for a very narcissistic, self-serving elite. And that wasn't actually always the case throughout history, which makes it very unique to the most modern history, I'd say the past 300 years.
yeah, it's when we see money involved, okay, how many people have died from tobacco? If we go to this chart again, all right, and I'll pull it up again. This is every year from 1960 to today, aligned with billions of federal spending from lobbying every year down here, 1960 to 2026. And these are the death toll, okay? And it's a minimum of 250,000 deaths every year. And it's only risen, all right? Now, we are starting to see a slight dip here. Looks like from 480,000 to 450, but maybe because people are just smoking less. We see that people are smoking a lot less. Have you ever experienced anything like that, or smoked or had an issue with
Oh yeah.
cigarettes or nicotine?
So my whole family is smoke cigarettes. My whole family through my whole life. I smoked for a little while and then I vaped. So I actually find vaping to be even more addictive because it doesn't feel like you're doing as much badness, is how I put it in my head, and it tastes better. So yes, I used to vape. It's very hard to quit. It's something you basically have to tell yourself like, okay, this is not worth it. Like, do I want to go on my hike this evening and actually enjoy it, or do I want to be out of breath and feel my lungs are like collapsing in themselves? So I didn't end up quitting, but like every once in a while, I still smoke a cigar. Like I like a cigar here and there because nicotine is addictive. So I mean, that's the truth of it. And I think that that's kind of how things were intended to be used every once in a while with a buddy socially. But they make these things so addicting that it's like you do it once and then you're like, oh, gotta buy a pack of cigs or the vape again or whatever. And that I think is the issue, because everything in moderation is fine. It's the addictive portion.
Yeah, they make it addictive on purpose. Definitely the vape. Look, when I'd smoked since I was a kid. I'd always smoked something. Cigarettes were always around. I was raised in Memphis, Tennessee for the most of my younger years, from like 7 to 16. And I smoked Newports off and on, like with friends. And I never really, even when I got older into my 20s, I maybe would have a pack of a week at most. There was a time where I had maybe a couple packs a week. And then I was like, I wanted to smoke inside in my house, met my wife. And so I started smoking a vape, and I also didn't like the smell. She hated the smell, but the vape is by far way more addicting, like extraordinarily, excruciatingly addicting. And the point of talking about this particularly is that they spend billions of dollars every year. All right. They're behind every nicotine that goes out. They're also behind the paperwork the studies that go out against what is healthy or not. Like even the studies that say that they are cancer inducing or that they can make you addicted, they're still behind that as well, because that's what they do. They're involved in the money part of everything. So It's sad to see, but this is what happens. The point of this show is to show you that people are dying and are being murdered by money and politics. This is just one example. It's a very easy to understand, because almost everybody in this country and in other countries have experienced somebody that smokes or is addicted. But we have to understand that this didn't just happen because people decided to smoke alone, right? It happened because they forced billions of dollars into our eyeballs, and they made it look cool in the beginning. The Marlboro Man, and there's the American cigarette situation is a very deep rooted and obvious.
They used to have it like with doctors. It's like your doctor smokes or something. I can't remember. I think I remember like an old ad where it was even like your doctor smokes too or something. Let me know if I missed that. But I think there was like old advertising about doctors like, we support smoking.
Yeah, there've been all kinds of stuff, and they'll do it. They'll lie. That's what I'm saying is they will lie to us. Sorry, I'm looking for a clip here to play next. They're lying to us in order to make money, and that's the problem. So what would set AIPAC apart to be any different, right? They are lying to us about what? All kinds of things. We're literally catching them in lies every time they say that the war in Iran is about X, Y, and Z. It's never about X, Y, and Z. And people are dying, again, because of lobby money. If money wasn't involved, do you think we'd be in Iran right now? No, nobody cares about them.
Yeah, and a lot of people think it's even because they like don't necessarily follow the regular central banking that the rest of us do, right? Like they had too much control over their own money source. And that's a really big reason why there's been so many wars, is because of the money, where people are like, if you had money, not in private banking, then we wouldn't have all of these wars, because private bankers make money off of the lending for all of the materials used for war. So if we didn't have the current banking system we have, we wouldn't be in any of these wars. So that kind of brings you back to, why are we in Iran? Well, there's multiple reasons, but one of them is the petrodollar and the oil and where they hold their money and how they conduct that. So it all goes back to money.
So OxyContin hit the market in 1996, 2 years after the tobacco CEOs lied. All right. And I'll bring up the chart again so you can see it. So we got tobacco, and then you have opioids. Okay. So they lied in 1994. And then 2 years later, we have OxyContin. And then opioid deaths start rising, and they peak at almost $4 billion in federal spending, with 500,000 people dying, over 500,000. Okay. And it says here 470,000 deaths since 2000. So every year we're seeing 470,000 people dying every year since the year 2000, 4 years after OxyContin made its arrival on the scene. And you can see it right now, even today. It's just gotten worse, right, with fentanyl and all that. So I'm going to pull a clip from the House Oversight Committee Sackler statement that I have here. It's an 8-hour stream, but I'm going to try to put some of these timestamps. I have like a couple of minutes right here in the middle of this. So let's see if we can get this is right on the money here.
That you train Purdue sales representatives, I mean, when I say you, I mean Purdue, the company, trained Purdue sales representatives and told some healthcare providers that it was more difficult to extract the oxycodone from an OxyContin tablet for the purpose of intravenous abuse, although Purdue's own study showed that a drug abuser could extract approximately 68% of the oxycodone from a single 10 milligram OxyContin tablet by crushing the tablet, stirring it in water, and drawing the solution through cotton into a syringe.
So that's what I used to do. I was a heroin addict, but first I started with OxyContin, and it just became too expensive. So if you want to know my story, which I haven't told the full thing yet, I've told in pieces here and there. I was 18 and I got introduced to OxyContin, and it was before they had made the time extended version, and we figured out a way to get around that. But ultimately, you could literally suck off the film, crush it into a powder, break it into quarters or however much you wanted. And then you could literally just put it into a liquid. You didn't even have to use fire to melt it or anything. You just turns it into powder, put it in water, and then you would inject it, or you could snort it or whatever. And that was the beginning of my rise to using opiates. So they're explaining here that process.
By crushing the tablet, stirring it in water, and drawing the solution through cotton into a syringe. Were you aware that Purdue trained sales representatives to make that misrepresentation?
No.
Is that a misrepresentation that would cause a physician to be more likely to use, to write prescriptions for OxyContin, or less likely to write prescriptions for OxyContin?
I couldn't guess. The implication is that it would be more likely, but I don't know.
And then number B says, told Purdue sales representatives they could tell healthcare providers that OxyContin potentially creates less chance for addiction than immediate release opioids.
So they're literally saying, I'll run it back again, that their representatives that go and sell the OxyContin to the doctors are saying that it's less addictive than X, Y, and Z. So let's hear it again.
Told Purdue sales representatives they could tell healthcare providers that OxyContin potentially creates less chance for addiction than immediate release opioids. Were you aware that Purdue told sales representatives they could tell healthcare providers that there was less chance for addiction with OxyContin than with immediate release opioids?
No, I was not aware of that.
And under C, it says sponsored training that taught Purdue sales supervisors that OxyContin had fewer peak and trough blood level effects than immediate release opioids, resulting in less euphoria and less potential for abuse than short-acting opioids. Were you aware that they were teaching sales supervisors to make that misleading
Absolutely not.
statement?
So these sales representatives are doing anything in their power to mislead so they can sell. Because the doctor doesn't want to hear, oh, well, this is more addictive than this pill I've been prescribing, but it's better for pain. So fuck them, just make them take it and get them addicted, and they'll just keep buying the pills from us. They don't want to hear that, most of them, and hopefully. But the problem is the doctors would become so addicted to getting the money and also get on these pills themselves. And so they're actually lying to the doctors, because the doctors are not pharmacologists. They're not the ones actually understanding, but they need to go learn. And that's the issue, is that they're so busy. If you know a doctor, I know many, they are so busy that it's really hard for them to just like go and study all these pills that they've got to give their patients. They've got hundreds of patients, thousands, one doctor, right? So this is...
Under D, it says told healthcare providers that patients could stop therapy abruptly without experiencing withdrawal symptoms, and that patients who took OxyContin would not develop tolerance to the drug.
I object to the form of the question. In reading D, you omitted the word certain, which appears before healthcare providers.
Oh, well, let me read it again. Under D, Purdue told certain healthcare providers that patients could stop therapy abruptly without experiencing withdrawal symptoms, and that patients who took OxyContin would not develop tolerance to the drug. Were you aware that certain healthcare providers were being told that they could stop therapy abruptly without experiencing withdrawal symptoms, and that patients who took OxyContin would not develop tolerance to the drug?
No.
Okay.
Man, that is so wild. Stopping, it is as bad as heroin. It is the same. These are the same. Okay. I'm going to play another timestamp. But you must understand, like, this is the House Oversight Committee. Okay. They are basically, quote, Purdue, and they also said this, and I don't think we caught it, but Purdue spent the next decade misleading the DEA, defrauding the United States, paying kickbacks to companies that would steer patients onto OxyContin, and exacerbated the opioid epidemic, which was classified as an epidemic. All the while, the Sackler family profited immensely from the deaths of millions and millions of Americans. 400, there was AG Letitia James as well. There was a $7.4 billion settlement with 470,000 deaths from the opioids since 2000. And that is more than every American killed in World War II. And the Sackler family settled for less money than they made, way less. So because you have been covering, because because I've done it myself, it's painful to watch these people lie as they're being asked to respond, how their reaction is, and all of this stuff is almost sickening.
It is, and
do you
they've
have
been
any-
funded for a very long time. The Rockefellers went way back in time and basically started choking out natural homeopathic schools and made it so they only funded their schooling, and basically made it so that anybody that would do any homeopathic remedies back in the 1800s stopped it, and they made the FDA and made it illegal. So that's why like a lot of pills that are natural are like, well, not FDA approved and all of those things. So I think that's another thing, is like, on top of the fact that they're designing all of these horrible addictive drugs, they also basically outlaw you from having homeopathic remedies. And that was done a long, long time ago. And so what are Americans going to do when they're in pain and you're a vet and you need to get through pain? You get on these opioids. And we had practices when I worked in the medical section, and they basically were like, we're not even giving out any opioids or anything like that, because they didn't want to take the risk on the doctor. And then we had other doctors were like, but what about the people that are in pain? Because they didn't have any other remedy for these people. And that's where it's at a crossroads, is doctors even have to think, I know the side effects, but I also know this person can't even live their life. And I think that puts Americans in a really bad spot, and mainly everyone in the world now. But so it's super messed up that happened so long ago even.
Yeah, it is super messed up. And this is the result of lobbying. And this is what James Madison, this is what they were trying to prevent in the first place. Why would we want Americans to die? You know what I mean? Why would you want to kill your own people? This is a problem. And we're seeing in many different ways now today, from Bill Gates and from the World Economic Forum and the WHO and all of these organizations that are trying to get their message across through lobbying. And it's sickening, to be honest. So this right here, I'm hoping I get the right clip, is when the attorney asked Richard Sackler if Purdue ever conducted any studies on whether OxyContin was addictive before they put it on the market. All right. And he pretends not to know. They never did. So I hope that this is right. So let's see.
Would I be correct that Purdue Pharma never conducted or retained anyone to conduct studies regarding addiction and physical dependency rates of oxycodone products, at least as of March 4th, 2002?
I don't know the answer.
Are you aware that counsel for Purdue Pharma's answered interrogatories that requested the names of all individuals retained by Purdue Pharma to do studies regarding addiction and physical dependency rates of OxyContin products, and copies of all studies? And he answered, we never conducted or retained anyone to conduct studies regarding addiction and physical dependency rates of oxycodone products.
Mr. Thompson, if you're reading from a document, could you show it to the witness?
No, I'm just asking him if he's aware of it, because I'm trying to move the deposition along. So are you aware of that?
No, I'm not aware of his statement.
So I'm not aware of his statement. It's one of these things, man. It's when you know what it's like, from firsthand experience, it's crazy, man. Right? Because the man who runs the company, the president of Purdue Pharma, the family who made $12 billion off of this drug, says he doesn't know if anyone studied ever that it was addictive. I mean, think about that. Like, what kind of idiot would you have to be to believe this bullshit? A pharmaceutical company brought a narcotic into the market, and they're saying that they didn't study if it was addictive, and he said he had no idea.
Those are the same people that go to the World Economic Forums telling us how regular people should have to live and impose all their crazy beliefs onto us, like eating insects as meat. Like, these are the same people, and it's disgusting. Like, they come and they're like, I don't know. They feign stupidity in front of a court, but then behind closed doors, they're like, let's rule the world, and here's how we're going to do it. And these people are a bunch of idiots. It's like, they definitely think we're a bunch of idiots because all they say is, I don't know, on camera, and then like plot world evils behind our backs.
Dude, for real. How do you think it even gets classified as a scheduled narcotic? The same federal, it's a class 2, scheduled 2, same as cocaine. Okay. And the president is telling you under oath in 2015, almost 20 years after it was launched. I almost want to do the fucking bird hands.
The bird, yes.
20 years after they launched, I got to do this right here. This is my.
There you go.
The president of the company under oath is telling you that after they launched that he is not aware of a single study on his own company that they have commissioned anything to determine if the drug was at all addictive before they sold it to you, to your parents, to your grandparents, to your kids. That is not oversight. Okay. That is a business decision if they didn't at all. Okay. Which I believe is a lie, because you have to study it in order to, well, I mean, I guess if you study it, you have to disclose it. And if you disclose it, the FDA labels it. And if the FDA labels it, the doctor stops writing the script. And if the doctor stops writing the script, the Sacklers wouldn't make $12 billion, right? So they didn't study it, apparently. They marketed it. They trained their salespeople to tell doctors it's safer than morphine. Then they send representatives 300 times to a single pill mill doctor in Kentucky, and they let the bodies pile up. 470,000 Americans dead, and the Sacklers still on the Forbes list, and not one of them are in prison.
Disgusting. I feel like too, when you put all that together, it's like, did anyone subpoena their computers just to like triple check they didn't get an email from somebody like, hey, sir, we're getting a lot of pushback from these few doctors about their patients dying. Should we look into this? Like, bullshit. Someone sent you an email. I would bet the little money I have that he has some email somewhere the past 20 years saying, hey, just red alert, we might be getting sued by these people because of X, Y, and Z. So I just don't think I buy it, obviously.
And then if we look and we go to our little map here, okay. Opioids. How much money were they spending? So in 2000, as deaths were rising, they spent more money. As deaths were going up, they spent more money, up to $4 billion. Okay. And they started at they started at 3. Deaths rising up. All right. Not good. Not good.